Today's novel is Ulysses by James Joyce. In this video, I'm going to give you a profile of the author, then a summary of the novel Ulysses. After that, we'll discuss on the themes and also the message. But before I begin, I will encourage you to like, comment, and subscribe to this video. So Ulysses. Let's start with the profile of the author, James Joyce. The full name of the author is James Augustine Aloysius Joyce. He was born in 1882 and he died in 1941. James Joyce is an Irish novelist, short story writer, and poet. Most of his writing has influenced modern-day avant-garde fictional works, and his short stories and novels are mainly centered on Dublin, where he was born. According to him, Dublin is the center of the universe. Ulysses, today's novel, is his best-known novel. Now, let's discuss a summary of the novel. This novel is a modern parallel of Homer's Odyssey. All the action in Ulysses takes place in a single day in Dublin on June 16, 1904. There are three central characters in the story, and they are intended to serve as modern counterparts of the characters in Odyssey. The first is Stephen Dedalus, and then Leopold Bloom, and finally his wife, Molly. Early in the morning of that day, June 16, 1904, Stephen leaves home, where he lives with medical students Buck Mulligan and Haynes. He goes to the school where he teaches, gets paid by an anti-Semitic headmaster, Mr. Dicey, and conveys Mr. Dicey's letters that he wants to publish in 2 newspapers. Finally, lost in thought, Stephen wanders along a beach. Meanwhile, Bloom, after bringing breakfast and mail to Molly, his wife, goes to pick up a letter from a woman whom he has illicit contacts with, and at 11 a.m. of that day, he attends a funeral. After the funeral, Bloom goes to negotiate the placement of an advertisement, while Stephen enunciates his thoughts about Shakespeare's play Hamlet, which thoughts were not accepted. Bloom finally, later in the day, finds Stephen and some of his friends drinking. He joins them and they move on to Buck's bar to continue drinking. Stephen gets drunk and Bloom helps him home after Stephen has been rough-handled by a soldier whom he trifled with. Finally, as the day ends, Bloom goes home to Molly, where they talk, and he describes his day to her, and he requests that she brings him his meal in bed. Now the plot. Although the poem Odyssey provided the scaffolding for the story, James Joyce skillfully takes the reader through a day's events at Dublin, while helping us to explore how the mind works. This story has been called a masterpiece of modernism, where thoughts and the mind refuse to be restrained by or accept the workings of classical philosophy. The dialogue is an example of the modern fictional technique called stream of consciousness. Thought is not organized but random, as Stephen and Bloom go through a day in their life in Dublin. In the story, we see Bloom as a Jewish outsider in the city, although he regards Ireland as home. We also see Stephen getting drunk often, while Bloom tries to revive him and help him. As the action takes place, we often are given the thoughts of the characters in a random fashion, each person illustrating something about their past that is relevant to the present. I like the way the story ends. It ends with monologue that concentrates on Molly analyzing her husband's strange request to have his meal in bed, as well as how she had been unfaithful to him. Her thoughts are variable yet believable. I must add that this novel depicts obscenity in graphic detail. The characters masturbate, engage in adulterous relationships, and liaise with prostitutes. You just have to be aware of that while reading the novel. Now, for some of the themes in the novel. One idea I took from the story is remorse over the sins of the past. Stephen is grieved at his mother's death since he was not at her bedside before she died. On the other hand, his father, Simon Dedalus, mourns her but does not regret how he treated her while she was alive. Buck Mulligan, Stephen's roommate, is one character who never shows any remorse about his actions, whether present or past. This bringing together of opposite characters in this manner sets the story as an intriguing one. We also see Bloom experiencing remorse. He has backslidden from his Jewish tradition of observing the kosher, a tradition that his father scrupulously observed. Another idea that one cannot fail to recognize among the principal characters is their quest for paternity. Stephen is in search of a symbolic father, and Bloom is in search of a son. Although Stephen's father is still alive, he regards Simon Dedalus as a father only in flesh, a father who is unsympathetic and doesn't understand him. This quest leads to Bloom and Stephen meeting close to the end of the day, and while Bloom recognizes Stephen as his future, Stephen on the other hand thinks that Bloom is his past who he is trying to come to terms with. Also, when one analyzes the character of Leopold Bloom, we see that he exemplifies compassionate heroism. Bloom's capacity for compassion and sympathy elevates him above his ordinariness. At the basic level, Bloom loves all creatures, even the animals. We see him sometimes feeding the birds and empathizing with a wide variety of situations. His love makes him a hero, although his wife envelopes him with the character of a cuckold. Now, what's the message one can get from this story? I will tell you that the novel is somewhat complex. It's quite dense. It is full of allegory and allusions. But one fact I took from it is love. That love is a need of all humanity. It was love that was a motivating factor behind the friendship between Bloom and Stephen Dedalus. These two main characters were on a search, and they ended up recognizing something they were looking for in the other. I also think that Ulysses is about sexual love, although James Joyce could be said to be obscene in describing that love. I want to quote a sentence by Bloom where he argues that hatred is not the true essence of life. Let me quote it. Bloom says, "Everybody knows that is the very opposite of that is really life, love." Although Bloom was mocked for professing love of the Christian sort where everybody loves everybody and also loves God who loves everyone. I believe that was the message of James Joyce's novel, because it is on record that the day the action in the novel took place, that is June 16, 1904, is the day the author met the woman he would later marry, Nora Barnacle. So that's is the novel Ulysses by James Joyce. I encourage you to pick it up and read. It's a very interesting novel. In fact, the novel has been quoted as one of the most influential books of the 20th century. And I encourage you to like, comment, and subscribe to this video. As always, I will say happy reading and have a nice day.